It was the kind of summer night that clings to your skin. Humid, heavy, and suffocating, as if the whole town had been wrapped in a damp blanket. I had just finished another grueling late shift and missed the last bus home. The streets were dead quiet, not even the usual hum of crickets, just silence, the kind of silence that feels wrong. I made my way to the old bus stop at the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a cracked bench under a leaning lamppost that buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds like it couldn't make up its mind whether to stay on or plunge everything into darkness. That's when I noticed her. At first, I thought it was a fellow commuter. A woman stood at the far end of the shelter, perfectly still. She wore a pale blue dress, faded like something from a thrift store decades old. Her hair was long, black, and messy, draping over her shoulders in tangled strands. She didn't move. She didn't even shift her weight from one foot to the other. I offered her a polite nod. No response. Shrugging it off, I sat down on the bench, pulling out my phone. The screen glowed weakly, and the signal wheel spun uselessly. My reflection looked back at me, tired eyes, sweat clinging to my forehead. But in the glass, just behind my shoulder, I caught something else. Another face. Her face. I gasped, jerking my head around. The bench behind me was empty. My chest rose and fell too fast, heart pounding against my ribs. Slowly, I looked back toward the far end of the shelter. There she was again, exactly where she had been, still staring down the road. I rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself I was just exhausted. A trick of light, maybe. But the longer I sat there, the colder the air seemed to grow. Which made no sense. It was a suffocating summer night. And yet, goosebumps prickled my arms like I just stepped into a freezer. I shifted uncomfortably, tapping my foot against the cracked pavement. That's when I heard it. A whisper, faint, almost like a breath brushing past my ear. My blood ran cold. I whipped my head around, but again, nothing. Just empty space, flickering light, and silence so loud it rang in my ears. Then movement. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, not standing anymore, closer, at the middle of the bus stop now, just a few feet away. I froze, my whole body locking up. My throat went dry. I wanted to speak, to ask if she was okay, but the words wouldn't come. She didn't blink, didn't sway, just stood there, stiff as stone. Suddenly, headlights appeared in the distance. Relief flooded me. A car. I waved desperately, stepping out into the road. It slowed. A taxi. I turned back one last time, needing to confirm what I had seen. She was gone. The entire bus stop was empty. I scrambled into the back seat, slamming the door shut. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I laughed nervously, the sound trembling out of me. Maybe I have. And then I explained. The woman in the blue dress, the reflection, the whisper, the way she had moved closer when I wasn't looking. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. His voice dropped low and serious. "You're not the first to see her. People say she waits there for a bus that never comes." A chill sliced through me. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard before continuing. "Years ago, there was a crash. A woman in a blue dress was on her way home. She never made it. Since then, people claim she still waits at that stop, hoping the next bus will take her where she was going." I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach twisted into knots. I turned to look out the window, watching the bus stop shrink into the distance. For a moment, I felt relief, safe inside the car. But then, in the glass reflection of the window, face appeared again, close. Right beside mine, I screamed, jerking away so violently the driver nearly swerved. But when I looked again, the reflection was gone. Just my own pale, horrified face staring back. The driver glanced at me nervously but said nothing. The rest of the ride was silent, thick with dread. When we finally pulled up to my building, I threw cash at him and bolted inside. At night, I lay awake in bed, sweating and shivering all at once. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. The dress, the hair, the face in the reflection. It's been months since then, but I haven't gone near that bus stop again. Sometimes, though, when I pass a mirror or glance into a window at night, I swear, I still catch a glimpse of her standing just behind me. Would you wait at that bus stop? If this gave you chills, hit the like button and drop a in the comments. It was the summer I turned 16, and like most kids my age, I was looking for a way to escape the suffocating boredom of small-town life. When I got hired as a junior counselor at a remote summer camp, I thought it would be nothing more than a fun way to earn a little money, make friends, and spend time in nature. But by the time that summer ended, I would carry something far darker than nostalgia. The camp sat deep in the woods, surrounded by thick pines that blocked out the horizon and seemed to swallow sound. The cabins were old, their wooden walls warped with age, smelling faintly of mildew and smoke from decades of campfires. The lake glistened during the day, a mirror for the sun, but at night it turned into a flat sheet of blackness that seemed bottomless. There were no towns nearby, no roads where cars passed. Once you were at camp, you were cut off from the world. The first week passed like I expected. Loud kids, too much sunscreen, long days filled with activities. But something about the nights unsettled me. When the sun dipped below the tree line, it felt like the entire camp was sinking into another world. The air grew still, the woods too quiet. The shadows around the cabin seemed to stretch into impossible shapes. The senior counselors brushed it off. It's just the woods at night. You'll get used to it. But I never did. By the second week, I was assigned my first solo night duty. Each night, one counselor had to stay awake in a cabin designated for overnight monitoring. My job was to check on campers if needed, watch for emergencies, and basically make sure nothing went wrong. It sounded simple, a little boring even. That night, I brought a flashlight, a blanket, and an old paperback I had grabbed from the camp's tiny library. The cabin was small, built of heavy pine logs, with a single creaky door and two narrow windows. The air inside smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. Outside, the chorus of crickets and cicadas rose and fell, lulling me into a sense of safety. For the first hour, nothing happened. I read my book, the flashlight beam shaking slightly as I turned the pages. But around midnight, the air shifted. The insects stopped their buzzing. The woods grew eerily silent. That's when I heard it, the faintest scratching. At first, I thought it was branches scraping the wall. The woods pressed close against the cabins, and it wasn't unusual for the wind to knock branches against the siding. But when I turned off the flashlight and listened closely, I realized this wasn't random. The sound came in steady, deliberate strokes. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the window. Every muscle in my body tightened. I forced myself to stand, slowly, and crept toward the glass. My hand trembled as I pinched the curtain between my fingers. When I peeled it back, my heart nearly stopped. There was nothing. Just the dark stretch of forest, trees swaying slightly in the warm night breeze. I let out a shaky laugh and told myself it had to be an animal. Maybe a raccoon, maybe an owl brushing the glass with its wing. But when I turned back toward the bed, the scratching stopped and was replaced by a new sound, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the door. My mouth went dry. No one should have been out at that hour. The campers were asleep, and the other counselors had their own cabins. My pulse thundered in my ears. I tried to sound brave as I called out, "Who's there?" Silence. I gripped the flashlight like a weapon and approached the door. My hand hovered over the latch for what felt like forever. Slowly, with breath caught in my throat, I opened the door just a crack, then wide enough to see the porch. It was empty. The night stretched out in front of me, thick and heavy, filled with the smell of damp earth and pine. I exhaled in shaky relief and was about to close the door when something on the ground caught my eye. Footprints. wet, bare footprints. They started on the porch and led down the dirt path toward the woods. I should have locked the door right then, crawled under the blanket and waited for morning. But pride, or maybe curiosity, pushed me forward. I stepped outside, the boards of the porch creaking under my weight, and shined the flashlight onto the path. The footprints glistened, fresh and wet, like someone had just stepped out of the lake. My heart hammered as I followed them, step after step, deeper into the trees. After about 50 feet, the prints just stopped. The ground ahead was dry, covered in pine needles. No sign of where the person, or whatever it was, had gone. That's when I heard it. Laughter. High-pitched, childlike giggles drifting through the trees. My stomach dropped. Every camper was accounted for, asleep in their bunks. I had checked myself. That laughter didn't belong to any living child. I spun in circles, flashlight beams slicing across the trunks, but there was nothing. The laughter echoed, bouncing in every direction, impossible to pinpoint. My chest tightened, my skin crawling with goosebumps. I ran back to the cabin, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the flashlight. For the next hour, I sat frozen, every nerve on edge. Then the footsteps began, soft at first, circling the cabin, bare feet padding slowly on the dirt and wood. Round and round they went, stopping, then starting again. At one point, I swore I heard fingernails dragging along the wall. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just sat there, my entire body locked in terror. Eventually, the sounds faded, my eyes burned from exhaustion, and at some point, I must have drifted into a fitful sleep. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the window. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it all, but when I stepped outside, my blood turned cold. Footprints, dozens of them, bare, wet, child-sized, circling the cabin. Too many to belong to just one person. Later that day, I pulled one of the senior counselors aside and told him what happened. His face went pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. After a long pause, he said quietly, "Don't talk about this in front of the kids." "What do you mean?" I asked. He looked over his shoulder, as if making sure no one else was listening. "You're not the first. Every year, someone hears them. The scratching, the knocking, the laughter. We don't tell the campers. They'd never sleep again." My throat tightened. "Who are they?" His eyes darkened. "No one knows for sure. Some say there was a fire years ago. Others say drownings in the lake. But people have seen them for decades. Always at night, always barefoot." That night, when it was my turn again for cabin duty, I begged to switch shifts. I didn't care how pathetic it looked. I refused to spend another night alone in those woods. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear it. Scratch, 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 followed by the sound of children laughing. Somewhere in the dark. That trip so vividly. I've stayed in dozens of hotels, some far stranger than others, but something about that night clings to me in ways I can't shake. Maybe it's because I wasn't prepared. Maybe it's because it felt so real. Or maybe it's because even now, years later, I sometimes wake to the sound of a phone ringing in the dark. I had been traveling for work, a last-minute assignment that pulled me away from home for the better part of a week. By the time I checked into the hotel, I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that makes your mind foggy and your nerves raw. The hotel wasn't anything special. Mid-range, chain-owned, clean enough but sterile. Cream-colored walls, patterned carpet, generic art prints hanging in the hallways. I had stayed in dozens like it. The lobby had that faint scent of lemon cleaner mixed with stale air conditioning. The receptionist barely looked up from her screen as she handed me my key card and mumbled the room number. I dragged my suitcase across the thick carpet, the wheels bumping over uneven seams, until I found the elevator. The ride up was slow, the kind where every floor ding sounds like it's echoing from another building. My room was at the far end of the hallway, on the 7th floor, past flickering light fixtures and doors that all looked the same. When I reached my room, I slid the key card into the slot, waited for the faint green light, and pushed the door open. A gust of cold, conditioned air hit me. The room was like every other hotel room. A bed, made too neatly. White sheets tucked so tightly they looked untouched. A small desk with a lamp, a TV mounted on the wall, and curtains pulled shut over a window that probably overlooked the parking lot. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not in any obvious way. Everything looked normal. It was more like the air itself was heavy, charged with something I couldn't name, a kind of quiet that pressed against my ears. I told myself it was just fatigue. Travel does that, it makes ordinary places feel alien. I shoved my suitcase into the corner, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The springs creaked under my weight, an oddly loud sound in the silence. The clock on the nightstand read 12:07 a.m. I sighed. Another long day ahead tomorrow. I didn't want to waste time overthinking shadows and silence. I showered quickly, letting the hot water wash away some of the stiffness in my muscles, then crawled under the stiff sheets. The air conditioner hummed in the corner, rattling faintly as it kicked on. I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember is the phone ringing. It jolted me awake, the shrill, old-fashioned ring cutting through the room like a knife. My eyes snapped open to the dark. The clock read 2:13 a.m. For a moment, I was disoriented. Hotel rooms always disorient you, waking up in a strange bed with curtains drawn tight, forgetting where you are. But then the phone rang again, insistent and sharp. I fumbled for the receiver on the nightstand and pressed it to my ear. Hello? My voice was groggy, half asleep. There was nothing, just static, faint and crackling, like the sound of an untuned radio. Hello? I repeated, irritation creeping into my tone. Who is this? No answer.
Just the hiss of static. Then, so faint I almost thought I imagined it, came a whisper. You shouldn't be here. My blood went cold. I sat bolt upright in bed, clutching the receiver. Who is this? I demanded. But before I could say another word, the line went dead. I stayed frozen for a long moment, listening to the empty dial tone buzzing in my ear. Finally, I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. My chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. Prank call, I told myself. Hotels had weird phone systems. Maybe someone had dialed the wrong room. Maybe it was kids screwing around. But something about that whisper, the flatness of it, the way it cut through the static, didn't feel like a prank. I tried to shake it off, pulled the covers tighter, told myself to sleep, but sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the building, every hum of the air conditioner felt amplified. The silence after that call wasn't like before. It was heavier, watchful. At some point, exhaustion must have dragged me under again. But I remember lying there for what felt like hours, heart racing at every small sound, replaying those words in my head. You shouldn't be here. When I finally drifted off again, it was only out of sheer exhaustion. But it couldn't have been for long, because the next time I opened my eyes, the red digits on the clock read 3:41 a.m., and the phone was ringing again. This time I hesitated. My hand hovered over the receiver, my breath shallow. The shrill tone filled the room like an alarm, relentless, impossible to ignore. Against every instinct screaming at me to leave it, I picked it up. Hello? My voice cracked slightly. Again, silence. Then the faint static returned, hissing in my ear. It was softer this time, broken by odd gaps of quiet, as if the line itself were breathing. I swallowed hard. Who is this? If you don't stop. The whisper cut me off. They know you're awake. My mouth went dry. My heart pounded so hard I thought the person on the other end could hear it. Who knows? I demanded. But the line clicked, and I was left with nothing but the hollow drone of the dial tone. I slammed the receiver down, every nerve alight with panic. My palms were slick with sweat. This wasn't a wrong number. It wasn't some kid playing a prank. Whoever was calling me knew I was awake. I got out of bed and paced the room. My thoughts spiraled. Should I call the front desk? Tell them what was happening? But what would I even say? That I got a creepy phone call? That someone whispered nonsense at me? They'd dismiss it. Or worse, think I was drunk, unstable. Still, the idea of being alone in that room made my skin crawl. I went to the window, pulled back the curtain, just enough to peek outside. The parking lot below was mostly empty, lit by a few yellow floodlights. My car sat where I'd left it, untouched. Nothing moved. I let the curtain fall, but the sense of being watched didn't fade. For the next half hour, I sat on the edge of the bed, every muscle tense, staring at the phone like it was a loaded gun. My eyelids were heavy, but fear kept me alert. When the phone rang again at 4:06 a.m., I nearly jumped out of my skin. I grabbed the receiver on the first ring, anger cutting through my fear. "Listen to me. Stop calling this room or I'm going to..." The voice interrupted. No static this time. Just a whisper, so clear it felt like it was coming from inches away. "Check the closet." The bottom dropped out of my stomach. I froze. The receiver pressed to my ear. My breath caught in my throat. My eyes drifted across the room to the wooden door on the opposite wall. The closet door. I hadn't opened it since I arrived. My hand shook violently as I lowered the receiver and hung it up without a word. My whole body was trembling. I told myself I wasn't going to look, that it was just another cruel trick. But the longer I sat there, the harder it became to ignore the weight of that door, the way it seemed to loom in the corner of my vision. Finally, with my heart thundering, I stood and crossed the room. Each step felt like it was pulling me deeper into a nightmare. My hand hovered over the handle. For a moment, I almost turned back, but some desperate need to prove to myself that there was nothing there made me push it open. The closet was empty. Just a few hangers rattling slightly against the metal rod, the faint smell of stale wood. I let out a shaky breath, relief flooding me so hard my knees went weak. "See?" I whispered to myself. Nothing. I was about to close the door when the phone rang again. The sound sliced through the silence so violently that I nearly screamed. My heart leapt into my throat. I turned back toward the nightstand, staring at the glowing red numbers on the clock. 4:09 a.m. The phone kept ringing, relentless, shrill. I felt like the sound was digging into my skull. I walked slowly back to the bed, my hands trembling as I reached for the receiver. I didn't want to answer it. Every instinct screamed at me not to, but I couldn't let it ring forever. I couldn't take my eyes off the closet. The open door yawned like a mouth, black and endless. My body screamed at me to run, to get out of that room, but my legs felt like they were bolted to the carpet. The phone receiver still dangled, swaying slightly, the whisper on the line breaking into fragments of static. Words slipped out between the noise, too faint to make out, but unmistakably human. I forced myself to move. I stumbled to the phone and slammed it back into the cradle, cutting off the sound. My breath rasped loud in the silence. That's when I heard it. A soft creak. It came from the closet. I couldn't take my eyes off the closet. The open door yawned like a mouth, black and endless. My body screamed at me to run, to get out of that room, but my legs felt like they were bolted to the carpet. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up. The sound was subtle, like the shift of weight on old wood. I told myself it was just the building settling, just my imagination. But then came another noise, a low, deliberate tap, like fingernails brushing against the inside of the closet door. I backed away, step by step, until I hit the opposite wall. My pulse hammered in my ears, my throat bone dry. I whispered out loud, "There's no one there, there's no one there." But deep down, I didn't believe it. The phone rang again. This time, the sound didn't make me jump. It made me rage. I grabbed the receiver, my voice breaking into a scream. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The whisper came instantly, soft and steady, like it had been waiting. "Look closer." The line went dead. Something in me snapped. I couldn't take the suspense, the torment, the constant not knowing. With a surge of desperation, I marched across the room and pulled the closet door wide open. At first, it looked the same, empty, just shadows and the faint smell of wood. But as I stared into the darkness, I realized the shadows weren't right. One of them was darker, denser, and it was shifting. My breath hitched, my vision swam. I could feel eyes on me, though I couldn't see them. The air in the closet seemed to pulse, alive, like something was holding its breath, waiting for me to step closer. By the time I burst into the lobby, my chest was burning, my legs like jelly. The night clerk glanced up from behind the counter, startled. "Sir, is everything okay?" I wanted to tell him. I wanted to scream that something was in my room. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out, just a broken gasp. I left without another word. The parking lot was silent, my car waiting under the dim light. I fumbled with the keys, slid behind the wheel, and peeled out of the lot without looking back. I didn't stop driving until the sun came up. It's been 3 months since that night. I never went back to the hotel. I don't even remember the name of it. My mind blanks whenever I try to recall. But I can't forget the phone calls, the whisper, the way it knew I was awake. I sleep with my phone turned off now. But some nights I wake up around 3 a.m., heart racing, ears straining in the dark. And sometimes, I swear I hear it again. A faint, hissing static, a whisper. Check the closet.